and wanting to learn more about how to experience true financial freedom God's way, honestly. And I'm really, really excited today to get to introduce you to my friend, Bob Lotich, who honestly, I feel like we've been friends for a long time, mostly because I've been following Bob's content and for quite a while, honestly. And it's just been really exciting to get to know you from a while ago and get to see how God has been leading you in creating this book and teaching other people about biblical finances. And a little bit just how I know Bob is back in 2018 when I was kind of toying with the idea of starting a blog myself. I stumbled upon Bob's blog, which I think at the time had only just I mean, you can correct me too. I don't remember when exactly it changed from Christian personal finance to seed time, but I feel like it was somewhere around then because I was seeing a lot of content that was like Christian personal finance and then seed time and all of that. But I stumbled upon his blog and emailed him, just decided to email him out of the blue and was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And Bob was so gracious and so wonderful to send me a video response, like personally responding to me and encouraging me to start my blog. And so here we are years later, and I have my blog and I have a YouTube channel and been helping people kind of with similar content. And it's just been really cool to kind of get to almost like not necessarily live in your shadow, but be inspired by what you're doing. And yeah, just so cool, like full circle. So welcome, Bob.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. It is an honor. And yeah, it's like we're all on the same team, pushing the same thing forward. And so, yeah, it's exciting that we get to work at this thing arm in arm and just help spread what I think is a really important message that the church needs to hear more of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I talked to so many young professionals who, are recently out of college and they have these jobs and are earning decent incomes for the first time. And they're like, no one has ever really taught me, no one at church, nobody at school, not my parents, like no one's really ever taught me how to practically and biblically manage my money. And so, that's my goal, is to help these young professionals who are like new in their careers to like understand these things. And yeah, it's so important because the Bible just has so much to say about it.
Yeah.
I honestly, I know your story. You shared some of it in your book at the very beginning, and I love for you to kind of share a bit about kind of like, you shared that one story of the car breaking down, and I love for you to kind of share like what it felt like to kind of hit that point of, I have no idea what I'm doing with my money and something needs to change.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I grew up wanting to be an accountant. And from the age 7, my parents told me pretty much, you're going to be an accountant, because I was always counting my money in my piggy bank and organizing it and just, weird kid. That's really what it was. And so then I got like at age 18, I was working at a bank as a bank teller and then a personal banker opening accounts for people. And then the Lord called me on this sabbatical to another city. And it was just part of my journey with God and what he was doing in my life at the time. And so he leads me down to Florida, a small beach town in Florida. And I'm down there after a few months. And I guess the reason I was telling you stuff about money is because I thought I knew everything about money. Like if you had asked me, hey, are you good with money? I said, sure. Yeah, I'm great with money, but the truth is I was a financial mess. Like I was a mess, but sometimes you can just hide a mess for a while. You can shuffle things around and you can convince yourself that you're good with money, even when you're not, type of thing. And so what you're talking about, this car incident, it was after I was down there for a few months. And my car breaks down just in the middle of the road. Like the engine died so fast, it's in the middle of the road. Cars are driving by both sides. There's a baseball game going on at a minor league ballpark that's like whatever, quarter mile away. So tons of cars are coming by. They're turning in. And so I'm like stuck in the middle of the road as all these cars are driving by, everybody's staring. And I remember like getting out of the car and there was an officer directing traffic. And I said, hey, would you mind help me, get this car out of the road? And he's like, nope, I'm busy. Like, Okay. All right.
Oh,
Well,
the
I'll see if I can do
pain.
this myself. And so, I'm doing the one arm, like pushing, turning thing,
Oh,
trying to, I'm 20 years old, like really just kind of panicked and freaked out. I didn't know anyone down in that town I was in. Um, and so as I'm like, I finally get the car over to the side of the road, I'm sitting in my front seat and I'm like, the panic's starting to set in a little bit. And the reason why I'm panicking so much is because I had just picked up my paycheck and I had to get it back to my landlord to pay rent that was due that day.
oh,
Okay. And if I didn't get it back to her that day, I had like 3 hours left, then there would be a $50 late fee tacked on, in which it's like, it's only $50, not that big a deal in many cases. But in my case, it was a big deal because I
wow.
didn't have an extra $50. My paycheck was just enough to pay rent. And I would have had no way to come up with that extra $50. And so I'm starting to freak out about this because I'm like, now I got to figure out how to get my car towed, repaired, and get back to the landlord. It's like all this stuff is going on. I had $7 in my checking account and I had one credit card. By part of my saving grace was that I didn't know you could have more than one credit card. And so I had one credit card that was $264 from being maxed out. And so I'm sitting there in this car trying to figure out, is there any way I can get this fixed, towed back to my place in 3 hours for $264 of available credit that I have. And it was just this moment where I'm like, really just cried out to God, like, I need wisdom. I'm not doing
Wow.
something right. I don't think this is the right way to do it. I don't know what I don't know, and I need help. And that was kind of like my breaking point moment where it's like, God, I've tried this my way, but if you have a different way, I want to hear it.
Yeah. Man, I think so many of us kind of have that like rock bottom kind of moment before
Yeah.
we kind of turn around our finances. Luckily, mine wasn't as dramatic as breaking down in the middle of a road, but it was definitely one of those moments where I was just like, I don't have enough money to simply like host my friends for dinner, which was something
Yeah.
that I really, really valued and really wanted to be able to do. And something that I kind of like saw and still view as like a ministry is like inviting people into my home to have a nice meal, have a good conversation. And at the end of the month, I was like, where did all of my paycheck go? And,
Yeah.
that was kind of like my rock bottom moment where I was like, I just don't have money to do the
Mm.
things that I really value. But, it wasn't as dramatic as, man, breaking down the middle of traffic. I like, even as you're like saying these lines, I'm just like, oh, like that sounds so painful and nobody's there
Well,
to
and it's
help.
different for
And
every person. Like some people,
yes.
God needs to get, like you, he could get hold of you a little easier, get your attention a little easier.
Mhm.
Apparently, for me, he's like, I already need something that's really going to get his attention. So
Really dramatic.
that was what he needed to get a hold of me.
Man, yeah. And so everybody does. We each have our own rock bottoms in a sense, or just that wake up moment, really, where
Yeah.
it's like something needs to change from this point. So then, fast forward, you dive more into learning about personal finances. You start a blog, you
Hmm.
start your YouTube channel and your podcast. And then now is this book, which, from my understanding, you started writing like 3 years ago. Is that correct?
Started. I'll just say this is what I have of the book so far. You actually have more of it than I do, Katie. And so, yeah, it was just about 3 years ago to the day I went to
Wow.
Chipotle and met with an author friend in town. Just asked him for some wisdom on it, and
Yeah.
that just set me off from there. Started working the proposal, and then just went from there. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a journey, man. I had no idea it was gonna take as much time as it did, but I'm
Yeah.
really happy with. Yeah, I mean, long story short, I've talked to different publishers over the years
Mhm.
about writing a book, but I've never really felt like the time was right, and I just didn't.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people that have books, and I just didn't want to add noise. I didn't want to add anything unnecessary. I wanted to wait
Mhm.
until I really had something that I felt like can impact people and
Yeah.
really is of value.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, that's part of why it took so long, but that's
No,
where we are.
I think, I mean, good things come with just that time. Like they kind of need
Yeah.
to simmer and be meditated and prayed over. And I think that, now after reading this book, there's a few things that I want to share that I really, really love so much about this book. One is, I mean, kind of like you said, is just like there is so much noise right now, just in the personal finance world. And
Yeah.
there's so many books of how to get rich quick and how to do this fast
Hmm.
and how to invest and make millions and things like that. And I love that the focus throughout your book is not on just accumulating more, and
Hmm.
rather it's more on how can we more closely align with what God really wants us to do with our money. And
Yeah.
there's a focus on giving and generosity and just being more prayerful about what we're doing with our money, which is ultimately, I think, what you and I both believe is like what God wants is for us to just be prayerful about it, and not necessarily, it's not bad to accumulate all of this money, but it's not just so that we fill our barns up. It's so that way we can go and do kingdom work with it. And so I love that focus. And one of the things I do want to talk about is this concept of the AUM, or assets under management. That was like one of my favorite takeaways from the book. I also love just the practical checklist that you gave at the end of every chapter that kind of give everybody like a actual practical go and do checklist
Yeah.
versus just giving people content and like, now at the end of a chapter, you're like, well, okay, I get all this stuff, but now what do I do? And so you lay it out and you give people time and space to think and pray and write down their thoughts and ideas. And I really just love this is my favorite chapter, or my favorite section more, is the earn all you can, because it
Yeah.
was such a different approach to that question. Like how can I earn more money? And so I want
Yeah.
to talk more about that too.
Great.
Um, so yes, those are my favorite things. So tell us the breakdown of how the book is structured, and then I kind of want to go
Mhm.
through
Sure.
the flow of that.
So yeah, so the book was kind of inspired by John Wesley. So he had a quote, and I'm paraphrasing a modern version of it. Yeah, I can read it to you in Old English if you want, but the modern version is essentially make all you can, save all you can, and give all you can.
Mm,
And that was something that I've always loved that quote. It's really resonated with me, and it's been something that has been really for the last 15 years with Linda and I,
mm,
a just a framework that we've kind of begun to, I don't know, just define our lives by.
mm,
And we added a piece to that that felt right for us. And so the gist of how we have this book broken down is four sections: make all you can, save all you can, give all you can, and enjoy it all. And in that enjoy part, which we can talk about in a minute, but yeah, but that's kind of the big picture framework. So we're focusing on all these pieces. We want people to be able to
mhm,
earn more, but we also want them to be able to save. And by save, specifically what John's talking about, what we're talking about as well, is just not wasting money. It's not just
mhm.
putting a whole bunch of money in your savings account, but saving is in not like wasting money on stuff.
Yeah.
Because you know as well as I do that your income rises to meet your expenses, or your expenses rise to meet your income, I should say. And therefore, it's like
Yep.
if you're making a ton of money, but you're spending it all, like what good is that doing?
Yep.
So we had to focus on that part, and then the giving part. Like I love that. His whole emphasis for the first two, make all you can and save all you can, is so that you can give all you can. And
Yeah.
I believe that, as Christians, like our financial success should be measured by what we give and not by what we accumulate.
Mhm.
And when you think of it through those lens, it just kind of changes things a little bit.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I I really love that, because so many people do desire, as I talk to other believers about what are your goals? Like just what do you want to do in life? Just like what are your passions? And a lot of people talk about how they would love to be able to be generous and do more for their church and do more for their neighbors and even just do more for their families. And yet there's this big barrier of I don't have money to go and give
Hmm.
to charities, to my church. And so, even if you just think of that concept of tithing, it's 10%. And if, 10% of like $40,000 a year is a lot smaller than like 10% of $1 million a year if you
Hmm.
are like a higher income earner. It's like just kind of that idea of you can just make this like really cool big impact for the kingdom.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about, I think that so remind me, the first one is, the first section is
So we
save.
start with save. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm trying to remember exactly. So, you talked about your car thing and you're like, it's time for a change. And so you decided then that you wanted to kind of start tracking things. And so you kind of were tracking your net worth, but you kind of came up with this new concept that
Yeah.
I am a huge fan of and like totally need to use, because I'm like, this
Great.
is so good, so true. But it's this concept of assets under management
Mhm.
rather than focusing on it being like your worth. So I want you to kind of
Yeah.
explain this concept of AUM.
Yeah. Yeah. So, some people would just say it's the semantics, but I've always wrestled with the term because I've been tracking my net worth for 15
Yeah.
years, and I think it's a really, really good exercise. But the thing I always wrestled with is just a couple different things. So this term net worth, like I'm sitting
Mhm.
here, I have this number that I'm saying that's my net worth, and it's like, does this number really? Is this the sum total of all my value? Like, and as a believer,
Mhm.
that just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't sit with me. Like, our net worth, our true net worth, has nothing to do with the number in the bank account, whether it's negative a million or 100 million. Like, and the
Mm.
problem is that so much of our society actually views that as their net worth, like their
Yeah.
true worth. Like, I
Mhm.
am, broke and bankrupt and destitute, and so I'm worthless, or whatever. I have $100 million in the bank, and I'm a big deal, and I'm really special. You know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
of it, and it's
Yep.
just not accurate. It's not right. And then the other part of it is just, I just like being aware that calling it assets under management just as a constant reminder to myself that this is not mine, that these
Yes.
are God's assets that I am managing for a while I'm on earth. And that's it. And because that's the hardest thing. It's one of the hardest things that
Mm.
I have found as a believer with money is just constantly remembering that it's all His. I'm just managing it. And like, as long as we're doing that, you and I and anyone else, like, the money thing isn't that difficult. Like, we can sit
Mhm.
there and trust that He's going to
Yeah.
take care of us because we're just His servants, and He is the one who's responsible to get it into our hands to, as His servants, He's going to make sure we have food to eat and everything else.
Yes.
But the problem is that we get our sticky hands on it and think it's ours, and that's where we get ourselves in trouble. And I know this for myself. I may not be the case
Yeah.
for everybody, but I'm speaking as a generality because I think it's probably true for most of us.
No, yeah,
So
totally.
those two things were the reason that I'm like, we're changing this. We're calling this our AUM, Assets Under Management, from now on. And yeah, and a lot of people like yourself seem to be enjoying it. So that's good.
I mean, I think it's so great. I mean, just exactly what you were saying, because I mean, yeah, as a money coach myself, I teach clients to track their money, like to
Yeah.
just to see what is going on. And I think one of the things that I at least wrote it down from, so I took your true financial freedom class,
Mhm.
and you guys talked about how like your net worth is a really good way to figure, or like a really good start to your financial testimony. And I think
Yeah.
you may have said that in the book as well.
Mhm.
Um, but I was a note that I specifically wrote down after like that one, like the first or second class or something. And I thought that was so cool because like having that number of like where you're at years from now, you can kind of go back and point to it and say, this is what God
Yeah.
did. This is how He brought me out from this maybe negative net worth, which was the case with you guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's so cool because it's a testimony that we get to use to show people this is what happens when you follow God's original idea and concept for our
Yeah.
finances.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in that, like you mentioned, we had a negative net worth when we first did it. And I remember being really discouraged by that,
Yeah.
feeling like I think 23 or 24 at the time. I've earned whatever, all this money. I started working, I was 13. I've worked like a decade
Mm,
and I have
yeah.
a negative net worth. Like, it was pretty discouraging. But uh, looking back, I am so thankful for it because exactly what you
Mm.
said. Like, I now get to see like what God has done. And it's just been really cool to see. And so we were talking with a girl who, she was in one of our classes. She had like a negative $250,000 net worth when she did the or AUM when she did the exercise. And, you know, I was really trying to encourage her. It's like, I understand this looks like a mountain, but listen, this is not too big for God. And this doesn't scare
Yes.
God. He's not freaked out by it. And if you let him, if you walk through this with him, like I promised you, you're going to have a really cool testimony, and you're going to be waving this thing around at some point, giving God the glory, you know. So
Yeah, no, I think it's so cool. So I love that you guys were so like authentic about it and just sharing like, I mean, this is where we were at, but with God, this is
yeah,
absolutely what is possible. So yeah, so save all you can. That was one of my biggest takeaways was, I mean, it was kind of that, I think, second chapter of your book was just like right away. And I
yeah,
was like, yes, this is so good. I'm like so pumped up because I knew that as I was going to go through this book, there wasn't a focus, again, kind of like what I was saying in the beginning, there wasn't a focus on just how can we make this number grow as fast and as big as possible. And I think it was just so refreshing after reading so many other books out there that are like just
yeah.
earn money and earn money, and that was something that was just
Well,
so
yeah.
hard for me.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things is that the world just views money as the goal. But like
Mhm.
for us as believers, it's a tool. Like it's a
Yes.
different thing. And so we have to be thinking about it through a different lens. We can't succumb to how they're thinking about money. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. And I wrestled with that a lot personally. And I mean, that's again like how I stumbled on your blog because I was kind of Googling things along the lines of like, what are Christians supposed to do with their money? You know, like
Yeah.
what does
Yeah.
God actually say about this? And then come to find out there's over 2,300 Bible verses about money. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
God actually has like a lot to say about this topic. And it's really cool too, because now leading into this next section of earn all you can, God kind of gives us these tools and these skills and abilities for us to
Hmm.
actually kind of build up a really good AUM in a
Yeah.
sense. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about you kind of talked you shared different ideas on how you can really focus on figuring out what that is, like what skills and abilities and talents that
Hmm.
God has given you and how you can actually utilize those as your I think you said your unfair advantage. Was that the
Yeah.
word that you used? That
Yeah.
was like so good. So talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, yeah, for me, it dawned on me this unfair advantage thing is as believers, I believe, you know, and I got to be careful how I say this, but I believe we should be operating, working in the areas of our giftings and callings.
Mhm.
And I don't think that that means every day of your life, you're going to be doing a job where you're perfectly lined up with it. But
Yeah.
I think we should be seeking those areas, seeking work that line up with the way that God has uniquely gifted us and called us.
Yeah.
So I know for myself, I spent 5 to 7 years in jobs that I wasn't in that. I was in the
Mhm.
opposite of that. I was in jobs where I
Mhm.
would work as hard as I could because I've always been a hard worker, but I just wasn't very, very good. And there's a quote by Einstein, apparently, that says, if you judge a fish by his ability to climb a tree, he will
Mhm.
spend his entire life thinking that he's stupid.
Mhm.
And and it's like that's how I felt because I was working so hard but getting nowhere, and there were all these other people who were so much better at the thing that they were doing that I was just not naturally gifted at. So I was in the wrong spot, you know. And within that, like, and part of that was I think God's plan. Like I needed to be there for some humbling and through some other things, but through prayer and through working, like He ended up getting me out of that into the right thing for me to
Yeah.
do, where I was able to utilize my gifts and calling. And that is what I'm defining as our unfair advantage. Because when we are operating in our God given gifts and abilities, like it's like the wind is at our back where we can go so much
Mhm.
faster versus me being
Yes.
in another job. I'm like a fish trying to climb a tree. You know what I mean? And so you want to be in that situation where you're using your God given gifts and abilities because, yeah, it just helps you make progress so much quicker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't even feel like work either. That's what's so great.
Mhm. Yeah. You and I have a friend in common, Jordan Rayner,
Yeah.
who is an author and talks a lot about these concepts of doing really good work for the kingdom. And I think
Yeah.
it's this really, because I think this is what was so kind of radical about the way that you explained it in this chapter was, yeah, like the world kind of tells us just like work really hard and hustle and then you can make all this money. And And then we have people like Jordan who kind of say like we need to work really hard for the glory of God.
Mhm.
And then when you kind of put these things together, it's kind of interesting. So when you focus on just doing really good work, not so that you can just earn money, but so you can glorify God and so you can do good things for other
Yep.
people,
Yep.
then all of a sudden like the money kind of flows in, and it's like, oh, like this isn't necessarily what I was going and seeking, but like I had that unfair advantage. And again, I know like how, in the beginning when you were like, I need to give a little caveat because it isn't a formula. It's not necessarily like do
Yeah.
this and then God will just overflow your
Yeah.
bank accounts with lots of money, because it doesn't always work out that way. But I think it's just really interesting that when we do focus on these things, there are a lot of blessings. And even you guys did a really great job about explaining what blessings can actually look like, because it's not
Mhm.
always monetary.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Yeah.
kind of talk a little bit to that
Sure.
too?
Yeah. So this has been something that, yeah, God's been dealing with me more and more, because I just, for a long time, I found myself praying for money.
Mm-hmm.
And like when there was a need, I would pray for money. And the Holy Spirit just kind of convicted me a little bit. Like, why are you limiting my ability to solve this problem by your man-made currency? Like,
Yeah. Oh, so
it seems
good.
like such a, anyway, so like in that, I'm like, that's a really good point. There's probably 1,000 different ways that you can solve and remedy this problem
Mm,
without just giving me more money. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like, and that doesn't mean that God won't do that sometimes and maybe you'll get a raise, but there's just so many interesting ways that God can deliver. And again, this is just still kind of like solving a problem that we're praying about with God.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like another thing I talk about in the book is just how I think we miss so many blessings because we're not paying attention. And
Yes.
and I think that's a little bit of a travesty. And there's the the whole frequency illusion thing, the whole thing
Mhm.
where, well, it started for me when I first got this Jeep. Okay. So I
Yeah.
got a Jeep, driving around this Jeep. And my first day, I drive through, I'm stopped at a stoplight, and this guy drives by. He's like waving like crazy at me. And I'm looking at him like, I don't recognize this guy. Like, I kind of like sheepishly wave, like, whatever. And so then I drive another couple miles, and then somebody else waved. And I'm like, man, everybody's having a good day. Like, this is great. And then I go like a little bit further, and then somebody else waved. I'm like, all right, what is going on? And I felt like Truman from the Truman Show type of thing. And
Yes.
and anyway, and then it finally clicked. Like all of these people were in Jeeps. And it's like,
Ah.
oh, okay. So this is what you do in a Jeep. Like you wave when you drive by. It's like, so all this starts clicking. And so then instantly I began looking for Jeeps. And
Mm,
because I began looking for Jeeps, I saw them everywhere. The day before, I didn't see very many Jeeps, but all of a sudden now I'm looking and I see Jeeps all the time. And we all know this. This is a red car thing. You start looking for red cars or what, and
yep.
it can apply to anything. But the point is like when you actually are looking for the blessing,
Mhm.
you will see it. And then, in the book, we go into some other examples of just how easy it is to miss things right in front of your face. And we're
Totally.
all really good at that. So if we're not looking for the blessing that God, because I believe, giving provides blessings, like it's just part of it,
Mhm.
we will reap what we sow. And so, but I think it's often different than we expect. I think it's really short-sighted to just think that that's going to be more money in our bank account. And sure, maybe sometimes it is,
Mhm.
when Jesus, Peter's boat and almost overflowed his boat with fish, like
Yeah.
that was probably a huge financial blessing. But there's just so many other ways that God can bless us, and it's just important to be looking for them and aware of that.
Yeah. I think that's so good. I mean, yeah, as a money coach, I think it's such a hard line to kind of walk, because yeah, you want to help people kind of get more money and to be able to go and do these things. But
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like if we focus only on money as the blessings from God, then we really are limiting him. And then we really do miss out on so many different ways, and the beauty of how God can actually respond to our needs. And I mean, it's kind of, I hope one day, when we get to heaven, we get to see like, remember how this happened? And this is actually how God showed up. And you're like,
Oh yeah.
oh my gosh, like that's crazy. It's
Yeah.
kind of, I mean, it's also like that, the footprints in the sand kind of thing of like,
Mhm.
like there's two sets of footprints, and then all of a sudden there's one set of footprints in the sand, and then you're turning to God and you're like, God, this is when you left me. And he's like, no, this is when I carried you. And you're like, oh, mind blown. Like, oh, like there are just so many ways that God really does bless us, but sometimes our minds are so limited to see something in one way that when we aren't open to seeing God outside of the box, we miss it. So I really loved how you guys explained that and kind of gave some ideas on how people can start to see these blessings show up. And yeah, I really, really loved it. So now I think that actually that part of the book was kind of your like the ending, but I want to go back and kind of talk a little bit about the give all you can section. And I really would love to hear how you and Linda had decided to start giving your age as a percentage, mostly because this is mind-blowing to so many Christians. And I think you kind of talked about this in the
Me
book
too.
that so many people say like 10% is the goal, but
Yeah.
you guys kind of look at it differently. So I want to
Yeah.
hear more about this.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I agree. I feel the same way. My mind's still blown. Like I don't get it. But the gist of it is I was praying one day. We had paid off all of our credit cards. We'd paid off our car loans. Like we paid off everything except we had a mortgage still. And I went to God one particular morning praying in a field, and I like, God, I want to get this house paid off, and I'm a planner. So I had my plan. It was going to take about 3 or 4 years based on the amount of available income we had, putting extra towards the mortgage, and we'd have the mortgage paid off. But I wanted faster. I'm an American. Like I just wanted it faster. So I'm going to God in prayer saying, all right, Lord, this is what I want to do. Can you help me do this? Can you help me get it paid off faster? And he freaked me out that morning. Like it just absolutely did. And I felt, I didn't hear an audible voice or anything, but I felt him speaking to my heart. If you really want to see me move on your finances, I want you to begin giving your age as a percentage of your income. And I remember stopping in my tracks and like standing up, like looking up, like, are you joking me? Like, who does this? Like, what? Like, and then immediately I'm like trying to do mental math in my head. Like, is this even possible? Like, are we going to be able to buy groceries? Like, how is this even going to work? Blah, blah. And I'm nervous but also just a little bit excited, but like the thing about it wasn't this strong arm guilt ridden, like you have to do this or else. It was this, it felt like an invitation. It felt like Jesus on the water, saying, hey, Peter, you want to come walk out? I got you if you do. Like, that's what it felt like. And so it felt like this gentle invitation. And so I went back home and talked to Linda, and I'm just married to an awesome woman. And she was like right on board, like instantly, and we both had our like kind of nervousness, but she's like, you know what, if God's asking us to do this, it's because there's something really awesome on the other side of it. And I'm like, you're right. And so anyway, so with that, like we set out that month and started doing this. We raised our giving from somewhere around 12% to 31%. And I didn't even know if we could do it. I just didn't know if it'd even work out. And then, doing my planning, I'm like, all right, well, I guess we gave up on this quick mortgage payoff thing. It's going to take like 10 years now, like at this current rate, And so, like, I shouldn't have been surprised, but Katie, I like 10 months later, our mortgage was paid off. 10 months later, the mortgage was paid off. And it's like, it made absolutely no sense. Like absolutely no sense in the natural, like rational financial advisor would say, this is the worst way to pay off your mortgage quick, is to give all your money away. It like makes no sense at all. But that's what God had us to do. And and that's just the way it works in the kingdom. It's like God, that's the way it works. It doesn't
it's like
work
kingdom math. Like 2 + 2 = 10. And you're like, what? Okay, sure. Great. Oh, I love it. I also just love how you guys now focus on tracking your giving as like that most important number. I think that is something that really all of us as Christians should do. And it's not so that way we can say like at the end of the year, look how much I gave because I'm so great. But just to kind of flip that idea of not focusing on how much that you just have and that you're accumulating, but how much you're actually going and being that
Yeah.
conduit to go flow that money out towards other people to
Yeah.
do kingdom work and stuff. I think that's so cool. Um, and I kind of want to wrap it up with just asking you the question, if somebody that's listening to this right now is like, man, I want to be more generous. I want to get to do these really awesome things. Maybe they want to be able to give their age as a percentage of their income at some point, or just do something really radical like that, but
Yeah.
really, really are struggling to see how it's going to work, or they really are just at a point where all of their money, there's just not enough. So what would you kind of say, or what encouragement would you give those people right now?
Well, I think it's important to differentiate, because the world will tell you that you just need to hustle harder.
Mm,
And I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is that we need to co-labor with God on this thing. I think that all of us, he has more for us financially. I
mm,
think we all have the opportunity to maximize as stewards, to be more like the 5-talent steward who turns into 10.
yeah.
We have that opportunity available to us. And so it's a matter of, are we going to do that? Are we going to manage well what we
Mm,
have while prayerfully expecting God to do the miraculous in our finances?
yeah.
And when you have that combination of doing the natural steps along with expecting God to do the supernatural, like, that's when I think you can see some significant miracles in your life. And I think they're available to all of us, and they all look different, and it's going to be different depending on what God has called you to do and what he has for you to do on this earth. But at the end of the day, I think that is available for all of us. And I would just
Mhm.
encourage people to run out and run after it.
Yeah, yeah, run after it. That was really, really good stuff. Well, okay, so we're kind of getting to the end here. Your book is coming out on April 26th, right?
April 26th.
So, yeah, so we're here, this video, this interview is coming out at the end of February, so people have about 2 months to go and pre-order it. So I want people to know exactly where they can go or how they could get
Yeah.
this book.
Yeah.
First off, so will you share just a little bit about
Sure.
where they can go or how to find that?
Yeah. So a couple different things. So this is a book, Simple Money, Rich Life.
Yes.
And so first off, so for somebody who isn't sure and wants to just see a little bit more what's in it, we have a 3-day challenge that you can get and kind of go through really
Mm,
3 of the most valuable things we put in the book. We're just giving them away in a 3-day
yay.
challenge. And it's just 3daymoneychallenge.com. So you can just go there and get it.
Perfect.
But if you actually do want to pre-order the book, we're giving away a ton of bonuses right now for it as well. Up to, really, we're giving away, depending on how many books you pre-order, up to 60%
Cool.
coupon code off our courses, which is like a $238 value. And then
Yes.
a whole bunch of other cool giveaways as well, or bonuses as well. And so that's just seedtime.com, like seedtime.com/SMRL, Simple Money, Rich Life. And so you can go there and find out anything you want to find out about the book.
Yes. And so you mentioned that you have courses. I want you to mention the course that kind of came from this book, The
Yeah.
True Financial Freedom, which I took and highly recommend to everyone.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So we have another live class that we do based on this book, which is called True Financial Freedom, like you just said. And that is just seedtime.com/TFF. The next one
Mhm.
starts March 10th. We're enrolling for that one. And basically, it's a lot of the principles in the book, in which we're just doing it live for me and my awesome wife. And we've been
Yes.
having a blast.
Yeah. I think it was just so cool to get to see so many believers who actually
Mhm.
want to be good stewards of their
Yeah.
finances. And one thing that I like tell everyone is that this stuff is hard to do all on your own. And just having that accountability and being with a group of committed believers who are like, I want to run after Jesus as fast as I can. And one of the ways that I can
Yeah.
do that is being good at my money. And that was just so cool to get to see all those people who were
I
really
agree.
passionate about that. And I just,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for everything that you put into that course and into this book and just into all the content that you create all the time. It's really inspiring for me personally, but also I know that it has helped so many people.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And thank you too, Katie. Like I appreciate everything you're doing. And it's just really cool. Yeah. God's got his hand on what you're doing.
Mm.
And I'm so excited that I got to be just a little part of your nudge to get
Oh,
started in the whole thing. That's really fun.
I know. It's funny because I talk about you a lot to my husband. So I'll be like, Bob Lotich, my favorite financial guy. And my husband's always like, I know who he is. Cause I like mention little things about you of like, oh, and Bob did this really cool thing recently. And now he's coming out with a book and I get to interview him. I get to talk to him. And it was like, just so cool, kind of full circle. And so it's just been
Yeah.
so fun to get to chat today and
Yeah.
have
Same
you
here.
share a little bit more about your story. And I'm really excited for everyone to come and read this book. And I hope that they do. I'll have links to all these things, the 3-Day Money Challenge, and your book and the True Financial Freedom, all in the description below the video. So if anyone wants to grab these things, definitely go check them out. I highly recommend all of them. So
All
thank
right.
you again, Bob.
Appreciate it, Katie. You're awesome. Thank you so much.